डॉक्टर प्रबुद्ध गांगुली अपनी कंसल्टिंग फर्म विजन आईपीआर के सीईओ हैं, जो बौद्धिक संपदा, अधिकार और ज्ञान प्रबंधन में सेवाएं प्रदान करता है। उन्होंने TIFR से रासायनिक भौतिकी में PhD की शिक्षा पूरी की है। उसके बाद 1977 में जर्मनी पोस्ट डॉक्टरल शोध करने के लिए उन्हें अलेक्जेंडर वॉन हम्बोल्ट फेलोशिप से सम्मानित किया गया। डॉक्टर गांगुली यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ विंडसर, कनाडा में रिसर्च फेलो थे, जिसके बाद वो भाभा परमाणु अनुसंधान केंद्र में संक्षिप्त अवधि के लिए वैज्ञानिक तौर पर कार्यरत रहे। उसके बाद अगले 2 दशकों तक उन्होंने उद्योग की तरफ अपना ध्यान केंद्रित किया, जहां उन्होंने अनुसंधान, वैज्ञानिक अनुसंधान एवं विकास प्रबंधन, IPR के रणनीतिक प्रबंधन, व्यवसाय कारखानों का प्रबंधन, प्रौद्योगिकी हस्तांतरण का कार्यान्वयन, ज्ञान व्यवसायों में प्रबंधन प्रणाली, कॉरपोरेट सूचना सुरक्षा का प्रबंधन जैसे विविध प्रबंधकीय में अपनी अलग अलग भूमिकाएं निभाईं। वह महाराष्ट्र एकेडमी ऑफ साइंसेज के एक निर्वाचित सदस्य हैं। डॉक्टर प्रबुद्ध गांगुली IIT जोधपुर में सलाहकार एवं सहायक प्राध्यापक हैं। वह जवाहरलाल नेहरू विश्वविद्यालय में विजिटिंग प्राध्यापक, विश्वकर्मा विश्वविद्यालय पुणे में एमेरिटस प्रोफेसर ऑफ बोर्ड एवं ऑफ गवर्नेंस के सदस्य और IIT खड़गपुर के डिजिटल लाइब्रेरी ऑफ इंडिया के को प्रिंसिपल के तौर पर कार्यरत हैं। उन्होंने 2005 से जनवरी 2018 तक भारत सरकार के नवाचार और IPR मामलों के लिए वैज्ञानिक सलाहकार के रूप में प्रतिष्ठित पद धारण किया। मई 2012 से जून 2017 तक उन्होंने तेजपुर विश्वविद्यालय, असम में संसाधन विकास IPR चेयर प्रोफेसरशिप का पदभार संभाला। वो विभिन्न सरकारों में IPR के प्रमुख विशेषज्ञ थे और इनोवेशन और IPR नीति के सलाहकार भी रहे। डॉक्टर गांगुली विश्व बौद्धिक संपदा संगठन के सलाहकार रहे हैं, जहां उन्होंने 2 दशकों तक राष्ट्रीय IPR नीति विकास के संबंधित कार्यक्रमों पर कार्य किया है। GI वैल्यू चेन पर उनका काम GI के लिए सामाजिक, आर्थिक और क्लस्टर विकास के लिए एक मॉडल बन गया है। तकनीकी क्षेत्रों में उनके 50 से अधिक प्रकाशन हैं। IPR में 60 से अधिक अंतर्राष्ट्रीय प्रकाशन हैं। उन्होंने IPR में 6 पुस्तकें लिखी हैं। फरवरी 2011 में उन्हें बौद्धिक संपदा के क्षेत्र में उत्कृष्ट योगदान के लिए द केमटेक फार्मा बायो वर्ल्ड अवार्ड से सम्मानित किया गया। 2014 में उन्हें लीगल फ्रेटर्निटी ऑफ इंडिया की तरफ से लीगल एरा के अंडर द लाइफटाइम अचीवमेंट पुरस्कार से सम्मानित किया गया। अब और विलंब ना करते हुए मैं डॉक्टर प्रबुद्ध गांगुली को नॉलेज क्रिएशन, प्रोटेक्शन एंड एक्सेस फॉर सोसाइटी बेनिफिट विषय पर अपना विचार व्यक्त करने के लिए आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगी।
Before I start my presentation today on knowledge creation, protection and access for societal benefit. I'd like to express my thanks and gratefulness to the Chancellor of this university, Dr. Deepak Tilak, and the Vice Chancellor of the university, Dr. Geetali Tilak. Thank you very much. It's not only my pleasure, but immense privilege to make this presentation in this great occasion. Having said so, I would like to start this particular presentation with a wonderful poem by no other than Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. As he rightly said almost 110 or 120 years ago, where the mind is without fear. And I start, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. What wonderful, poem where he summarizes the entire philosophy of knowledge and how knowledge is to be used across the world by saying the world has not been broken into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Having started with this, I would like to go ahead into the next phase out there. And the slide which I'm presenting here is something which traces the history of humankind, say from 2 million years ago to the present times and possibly to the future. If you look at this particular slide, you'll find that 2 million years ago, when the coexistence with nature and human beings was essentially a hunting society, the birth of human beings at that point in time. So basically it was an agrarian society. Then it developed into industrial society where you had industrial products, development of irrigation techniques, and development of natural products. The next phase, which was very important, was the whole concept of inventions of steam locomotives, start of mass production, industrial society, and we know that that was at the end of the 18th century. So explicit technology added products started coming into the market, into the society, and the society then took a different turn. That led to the latter half of the 20th century, where we had information products, where you had invention of computers, start of information distribution, information society, which then led to knowledge products. And then we came to what we call as Society 5 or super smart society. We had Internet of Things. And that started off from the 21st century. What has taken on from there on? Society has undergone a major change. We have now started moving from the physical world to a digital world, and now to what we call the metaverse. And so we are moving towards what I call as Society 7. And I will touch on this later, that we are now going into some sort of a hybrid situation where we have the mirror of the real world. We have artificial, reality. We have virtual reality. We have the real world, and we all seem to be moving into a phase of new technology, of artificial intelligence and hybrid systems. So we're getting into a completely different society, starting off way back 2 million years ago, and what we are doing now, the society has undergone major changes. And with these major changes, the needs of society are different, the cultural backdrops are different, the way society is organized is different, and therefore the knowledge requirements of the society are also different. Having said so, we go to knowledge societies is what we have built up now. Basically the foundations are on human needs and rights. We understand that societies must have pluralism, it must have inclusion, it must include everybody or as many people as possible, it must have equity and openness. And these are governed by 4 key principles, which are freedom of expression, universal access, diversity, and education for all. When you look into these, you go further into 4 major building blocks, which are knowledge creation, very important, knowledge preservation, which is also equally important, knowledge dissemination, because if you do not disseminate the knowledge, then how does society grow? Then once you've disseminated the knowledge, then comes in the whole concept of how do you utilize the knowledge. And when you do these 4 things together, that is knowledge creation, knowledge preservation, knowledge dissemination, knowledge utilization, you put it all together in a string, lace it together, and what you then develop are knowledge societies, is where we are presently living in. So knowledge society is something, there are special needs of how the entire dynamics of knowledge will be managed under the various circumstances in the knowledge society. Having said that, we all live in open markets, and we all say that what makes some goods and services sell more than others. And there are more than one reason for this. For example, when I go to the market or you go to the market, right, we look at some products, even if they are of the same price. Some are, which appeal to me, may not appeal to you. Some may say, well, this has got ethnic, it has got some cultural links, I will buy that product. Some say, no, it's very modern, I will buy the product. Some say, it's very functional, therefore I will take it. Today, in the days when we are on internet and we are buying and selling things over the net, the ease of selection and purchase are also equally important. So all these new developments that have taken place are because somehow the knowledge has evolved, innovations have come in, and the society has progressed. Let's look at the dynamics of all these processes and what sort of controls them at the end of the day. So when we look at all these, the human mind, which is so powerful, we talk about artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence has not even come to 1/10 of what the human mind can do. Human mind creates. So what are the different types of creations that the human mind brings in? Well, we can always look at various things. One is you can look at this slide. For example, it's an example of a creative expression. These words are not new, but I've arranged them in such a way that it sort of is a bit appealing. So it's an example of a creative expression. When we sing, when we dance, when we play an instrument, when we are making a film, we make a video, we do sculpture, all these are different aspects of creative expressions of the human mind. So that's one form of creations of the human mind. What are the other forms? That we can make different types of shapes and ornamentation, like we have jewelry, we have different types of furniture, we have all these different shapes and ornamentations out there, which are aesthetic aspects of articles. So those are the other types of creations. Then there are creations where we address functional issues, that is technical improvements. I want a better chair, I want a better car, I want a better computer, I want a better mobile. So that's where we are addressing issues of functionality, and so creations come from those ends as well. So looking at all these different forms of creations, or for that matter, new business methods, like Amazon, for example, right, is a new business method. So people have come across. Uber is another business method. So we have all become used to these different creations of the human mind. And therefore, having looked at different creations of the human mind, the different types of creations of the human mind out there, let's look at the fundamentals of what controls that, or what governs that. And that is where we have creativity of the human mind. What is creativity? And as Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore has said, making thoughts happen. and he said, if I can't make it through one door, I'll go through another door, or I'll make a door. Look at these beautiful words. He will innovate. I will go through another door, or I'll make a door. I won't give up. I'll find a solution to the problem. And therefore he says something terrific will come no matter how dark the present. That's Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore's idea of creativity out there. And I couldn't find a better example of a creative person than him to start with. Let's look at one very important concept as to when does a creation become an innovation. We use the word innovation very loosely, but when does a creation become an innovation? My answer to that is only when a creation diffuses into society for use. Mind you, very important, it must permeate into society, and society must begin to use it, and only then that our creation becomes an innovation. And therefore, in short, when we want to innovate, what do? We transform our ideas. We translate those ideas into action, and then we transfer it transfer it so that the thoughts become tangible assets. Mind you, I've written tangible asset. Thought is an intangible. And when we convert that thought into something actual, it becomes tangible. When the tangible has a certain value, it has an asset. It becomes an asset. Therefore, thoughts to tangible assets is the process of innovation out there. I just wanted to show you very quickly that over the last 120 years or so, if you look at different types of creations of the human mind, for example, the motor car, the aeroplane, electricity, telephone, by the time these were invented and by the time they went into the society and people started using them on a regular basis, look at what happened. In case of telephone, electricity, aeroplane and car, it took a fairly long time before it diffused into the society, and they became innovations and people started using them on a regular basis. But look at what happened when you look at radio, television, VCR. It did not take that long time. It just shot up. Within 20 years of their invention, it diffused into the society very rapidly. And then see what has happened after that. Things like internet, cell phones, and computers and things of that type have shot up straight vertically. Today, by the time we see one type of cell phone, the other development of the cell phone is already ready and people are ready to buy it, and it comes into the market rapidly. So what has happened? Technology adoption by the society has become very rapid, and therefore whole processes of thinking has changed, and therefore we need to relook at the dynamics of knowledge in our growing societies. Having said that, we need to look at what are the two aspects. There is an ethical aspect and there is a legal aspect on knowledge access, whether it's in digital or non-digital world. And I call it that when you take this particular thing for creative repurposing, that means there's already some knowledge, I put some knowledge into it and I repurpose the existing knowledge for what? I reuse, I revise, I change, I remix, I restructure, I retain, I redistribute. But while doing this, one has to cautiously do it. That ideas, creations, expressions of others which I take for repurposing, I must give credit to them as well. That is called attribution, and that aspect is governed by ethics. The other part, can I reproduce what somebody else has done? And that, if I can reproduce, even if I give attribution, even if I acknowledge, can I reproduce? That is a legal aspect, and we must understand the way in which this ethical part and the legal part goes hand in hand in the use of knowledge and the knowledge dynamics in the recent times. In doing so, I just want to bring in for sustained societal growth powered by continual research and innovation with decisiveness, excellence, inclusiveness and fairness. They have to all be in dynamic synergy. But how does this come in? It comes in with various partners. For one of the partners, which I say is operating stakeholders. So these are institutions like, for example, Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapith is an institution. I call it as a wellspring of knowledge. It's crucibles of learning where knowledge gets irrigated and knowledge grows. These are knowledge creators in such institutions. So they are educational and R&D institutions like the Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapith. There are nourishing sources. You need funding agencies. The funding agencies can come from different places. You have not only that, the institutions can create the knowledge, but who will convert that knowledge into something useful and take it to society? And I call them knowledge translators or knowledge converting channels. And these are our entrepreneurs, industry, NGOs, startups and government agencies and their like. So they are the people who take the knowledge and take it to the society, and society begins to use them. They become translators. So they take the knowledge and translate it and make them useful and available to society. To do this, you need also people who facilitate. So governments become the facilitating agency. All these function within two frameworks, ethical framework and legal framework. So we need to understand what are those ethical and legal frameworks. So this whole concept works all together, interlaced, interwoven. You cannot separate one from the other. And in doing so, we have already talked about the creation. I just want to repeat that slide without repeating what is written there because I've already explained that in some detail. So therefore, where do we stand on such a matter? Creations of the human mind, when claimed as a property, that means whatever I've created, if I claim that as my property, right, then the question comes in, do I get some rights for that property? Like if I buy a building, it becomes my property. Then if it becomes my property, do I have some rights to it? Same thing with intellectual property rights, that when I create something of the human mind and I convert that or claim it as a property, what are the rights that come with that property? The rights, intellectual property rights, are nothing but rights given to persons. Who are those persons? They are creators. Why are those rights given? They are given as incentives. For what? For creations of their minds. So when people create something from their mind, an artist paints, a singer sings, a poet composes a poem, a sculptor creates a work of sculpture, a scientist invents. All these, a technologist converts that into a technology and somebody makes it into a product to sell into the market. These are all creations of the human mind. So can we have a system which actually incentivizes people to continuously create? And because they create, and because those creations are useful to society, the society, that means the government, says, okay, I will incentivize by giving you some rights. And what are those rights? It's an interesting set of rights. To stop others from using their creations without their consent. That means if I have converted my creations into something useful, the government then gives me some rights. And what is that right? That right is I can stop others if they want to use my property without my consent. So if they have to use my property, they must come to me, I will give consent, then only they can use. So it's a very, very powerful right, and those rights are called intellectual property rights. So now you can see why intellectual property rights is a very important component of the entire societal growth and growth of knowledge in society. Very significant and very important what it does. Now, let us look at, I'm sure you have heard some of these terms. You must have heard the term patent. You must have heard the term copyright. You have heard the term design registration. You have heard the term trademark. You have heard the term geographical indications. What are these? So basically, as you see on one side of this particular slide, I put something called IPR tools, intellectual property tools. These are tools, these are legal tools. What do they do? So, as far as creative expressions are concerned, I talked about creative expressions. I write a poem, I write a novel, I do a painting, right? Those are all creative expressions of the mind. I sing, I dance, I play the musical instrument. All these, I take a photograph. Those are creative expressions. Now, those creative expressions can be protected by a legal tool called copyright. So, we must remember that copyright is the legal tool that protects creative expressions. Very important. Now, there are things like, different articles. Now, if you take these different articles, for example, let us take this particular, my specs, the frame, right? Now, this frame is of this type, whereas you could have the frame also round, you could have the frame which looks like the eagle's eye. Lens is the one which is the functional part, the non-functional part is this part. So, the shape and the ornamentation of this, right, has nothing to do with the function, and therefore these different shapes and ornamentation can be protected by what is known as design registrations. Very important out there. We are not talking about functional part. The lens is the functional part, and the entire technology that governs the way the lens is can be protected by what is known as patent. So patents protect inventions, whereas design registrations protect the non-functional shapes and ornamentation. Trademark. What is a trademark, for example? It's a mark used in the course of trade. For example, when you take, when you take, for example, when you take your iPhone and you see that partially eaten apple with the leaf, that's a trademark of Apple. You look at that, and even if it's not written Apple, you'll say, oh, that is Apple. So that's a logo, a mark used in the course of trade to create an association between the product and the person and from where the product is coming. So you make the correlation, and that is what is the trademark. So you can look at all these in different forms. I will touch geographical indications later. Important for us that in law, the intellectual property rights are given by the government. That is granted by the state. By state, I don't mean state of Maharashtra. By here, the word state means the country. And what does it do? It gives you ownership to the knowledge that you create. Because you created ownership, you created the knowledge, and because you got the ownership, there are some rights to it. These rights are territorial. When the government of India gives you the right, those rights are true within the political boundaries of India only. Is it forever? No. There are certain fixed terms for these rights, and those are defined by law. Very important for us that with this, every law has some exceptions. That means, as I told you, when you get the intellectual property right, if you get a patent, or you get a trademark, or you get a copyright, or you get a design registration, what does it do? It gives you the right to stop others from using that particular thing without your consent. But while making the law, the government also thinks about some broader aspects of society and therefore creates some exceptions to that law, where the public can use that property even without going to the owner, and there are some permitted uses without prior consent of the knowledge owner, and we'll look at some examples of that. And then, because the government has given you some rights, the law also says the right holder has several obligations, and therefore the knowledge owner must ensure responsible use of the generated monopoly for societal good. So if you don't do that, the government can take action on you, or society can take action on you. So it's a game that you play, and you must learn the rules of this particular game. So what happens? That you have the whole knowledge domain, and when if this knowledge domain, some part of the knowledge domain, as I put, is what is known as it's called knowledge, some part which is open for free use, uncontrolled public use, is like your garden. You can walk into a garden out there without any constraints. But if I want to enter somebody's private garden, so in the area of owned knowledge, can you enter? Yes, you can use, but it is controlled. So for that, you need to take permission to use that particular knowledge. So the knowledge domain gets split into two parts. One is the owned part and one is the free part. The question is, if the owned part becomes too big and the free part becomes small, then it's not good for society. So we have to see how to balance this particular game between the closed part and the open part. So important part, therefore, these are examples of design registrations out there, the different shapes and ornamentation. These are different examples of trademarks in India. All of you are familiar with this. I will not spend time on them, but I will go further into the game. When you do all these laws, very important for us to understand, on one side you have the exclusive right, on the other side you have the obligations, and in the middle there is something called exceptions. So you're all the time juggling between these, and the society, the knowledge becomes useful to society only when there is a good balancing between the exclusive right to knowledge, the obligations of the owner of the knowledge, and the exceptions that the law provides to these parts. So this is one part of the balancing act that society becomes, has to be aware of. The other part is very important in the balancing part. The exclusive right versus limitations and exceptions, and this comes from law. So for example, suppose you have written a book. Now, I am teaching my students in a class in the university. Let's say in Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapit, I'm a teacher. Now, copyright says you cannot, the right to reproduction of the book is only by the publisher if the author has given the rights to the publisher. Now, if I reproduce some parts of that book while teaching my students, do I have to go to the publisher all the time? Then when will I teach? So the law brings an exception in the copyright law. What is the exception? That for purposes of teaching, I can reproduce certain parts of that in the course of my teaching. So there is an exception that carves out of that. Like this, there are many exceptions in copyright. For example, if I am visually impaired, I am physically challenged, right? Then should I not have the right to read a book? Then should not the book get reproduced by the form of Braille? Or should the book not be produced by somebody in special format so that I, as a person who is visually challenged, is able to take advantage of that book? Copyright law brings an exception to that part. And this way, we need to look at the exceptions on one side, the limitations of the law on the other side, and exclusive rights on the third side. And we need to look at these very, very carefully. So society gains out of this type of thing. There is another very important part, that with the knowledge which is owned, how do I access the knowledge? That's number one. And even if it is accessible, if it is not affordable, then what is the use of that access? And therefore, we always need to look at, when we look at intellectual property rights, this issue of accessibility with affordability becomes another issue of balancing. So accessibility, affordability, how do you do this particular bit? Very important. Now, for example, during COVID, we all needed vaccines. Now, if we have vaccines, someone who invented the vaccines and patented the vaccine, which they did, and if that was not made accessible, then people would die. Question is that even if it was made accessible but not affordable, then still people would die. So the question came in that should we not bring in these concepts, and therefore either the people who own the knowledge on the vaccines make it accessible at affordable prices, and if not, then the government would intervene and see how to make it affordable and accessible. So these are the type of constant tensions and interrelations that we need to establish in the whole knowledge dynamics in the world today. So the other part, many a times we get to hear, oh, is our traditional knowledge being stolen, and people are making getting inventions and taking ownership of our traditional knowledge. Big question. And therefore, in our Patent Act, there are certain limitations to it. And it says an invention which in effect is traditional knowledge is not patentable. But mind you, it says invention which in effect. It does not say an invention which is traditional knowledge. So we must understand when do these inventions in effect are not traditional knowledge, and when an invention in effect is traditional knowledge. And therefore, a few years ago, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research in India, the CSIR, prepared what is known as the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. And now that traditional knowledge digital library database is available to patent offices. So when people file patents, they go into these particular databases to see whether this in effect is traditional knowledge or not. And if it is, then they will not get patent. If it is not, then you will get patent for it. So very important out there. Now, therefore, what are the uses of all these things? One is, if I am the owner of the intellectual property, maybe I can manufacture the product, maybe I can use the process by myself, okay, or I can contract it to some other party. I can keep the property, I can rent out my intellectual property to someone for manufacturing, but marketing can be done by me, or maybe I can give it to somebody else and earn some rent, which is called royalty out of that. I can license it, that is rent it for manufacture and marketing with geographical breakups. So somebody will market here, somebody will market there, somebody will market. I can control that particular bit. I can sell off my IPR like any other property. I can set up joint ventures. I can barter. I can give you my property, you can give me the property, and we can exchange our rights with each other. So the whole bunch of things that can be done. I can donate my intellectual property rights. I can even take my intellectual property right like you do with gold. I can go to the bank, or I can go to a financial institution and actually, securitize, give my intellectual property to them and take a loan against that. So a whole bunch of things are possible that one can do. I want to take a quick case study before I go further. That I am taking the case study of a young entrepreneur from Mumbai. What did he do? He created a device. What is this device? That when water flows through this device, if there are microbes in this water, the microbes are killed. How they are killed? Now look at this part, very interesting. That creation, he is created in such a way, this device which you are seeing on this side of the screen, right? When the water flows through this particular device, it breaks into millions and millions of very, very small bubbles. When these bubbles burst while flowing, they release a huge amount of energy, and that energy is sufficient to kill all the microbes. So what does he do? Because he uses the device, no electricity is used, no chemicals are used, no UV, no membranes, no boiling, no maintenance, nothing. All you make is water flow through this particular device and the microbes get killed. Very interesting. See this creation, fantastic creation by a young man. And then what did he do? He has done this, he has protected this as his patents, not only in India, in different parts of the world. And then he has taken that and gone. He has made a startup, and he has gone to different companies, different organizations, and they're all supporting him. And today his whole thing is a great success. In fact, he had also accompanied our Honorable Prime Minister Modi to Israel to demonstrate this technology in Israel when out there, and this is a great success. So this shows you that these socially responsible, where is this used? That when you take a tube well and simply fit this particular device on the tube well and pump the water, what comes out of the tube well is all free of microbes. How powerful. Now, should we not reward these type of inventors? Yes. How are we rewarding? We are rewarding them by getting patents out there, and they get it on a worldwide basis. I'll quickly move from there into what I call as geographical indications. Many of you may have heard about this. And what is geographical indication? See the word geographical indication. So when you take goods, and if you take some indications of those goods, say if it is agricultural goods or natural goods or manufactured goods, and if it originates from certain region and it carries the signature of the region and the properties from there of that property, and there is a signature of that region in that particular product, then the name gets protected from the name of that product gets protected using the because it comes from a certain area. For example, let's take example that Pochampalli Ikat Sari. The moment you use the word Pochampalli Ikat, immediately we know that it's a silk sari with these type of design, this type of silk. We know what to expect. Now this term, Pochampalli Ikat silk sari, this is protected by what is known as geographical indication in India, which means if you make this sari somewhere else and not in Pochampalli using these particular traditional methods, you cannot call it Pochampalli Ikat sari, right? So it's a tremendous protection of our, of some of our traditional products made in traditional ways. This is a very powerful tool of intellectual property rights. And what I showed in this slide is across the country. For example, if you look at, there are many products in Maharashtra, but Nagpur oranges, for example, Nashik Valley wine, Sholapur, Chadar, all this. In Goa, for example, Feni. So many all these in Karnataka, for example, you have these different types of chili, Mysore silk, Mysore sandal. If you look at Sikkim, large cardamom. So all those names are protected. So if you don't make the products there, in Assam, Muga silk. So all these these products carry the signature of those regions, and that's protected by geographical indications. And these are very powerful tools by which we can protect traditional knowledge. Interestingly, I come back again, I'm very strongly influenced by Rabindranath Tagore. And interestingly enough, he wrote this Bengali poem which all of us know. But I'll just read out one line and then go to the English translation which I made some time ago. And it says, Jodi tor dak shune keu na ashe, tobe ekla cholo re. And what does it mean? That the words of wisdom on innovations, according to me, which has come from Rabindranath Tagore, here is my translation. If no one pays any heed to your call, then go on your own. Ekla cholo re. If everyone turns your face away in fear, then you voice alone to speak out your mind with an open heart. If everyone turns back and no one turns to look at you, then squash the thorns on the path with your blood-stained feet, move ahead alone. If no one upholds a light in the dark, stormy night, bolts all the doors, even then, in your lightning pain, kindle the fire bright in your heart to light your soul path. Now, that's where his poem, Ekla Cholo Re, gives us these words of wisdom and confidence that even if nobody is listening to you, don't lose your faith. Take it and go forward and deliver. That's what innovations are all about. And therefore, we come into this peculiar situation. Is there a tension in society between IPR holders and user groups? And therefore, where and how does one strike a balance? This is like the tug of war, right? How do you strike the balance? And the important part here is, like here, actually that's my grandson, doing a bit of tug of war with his pet. And see after that, how beautifully they sleep, bond of peace and owner and user together. This is what we want intellectual property rights to function in society, where owners and users come together and we find a balance of doing. So we give the owners of the creators and the owners of intellectual property the rightful place, and yet the society gains from them, and then we have a peaceful coexistence and a bond of peace between the intellectual property rights and the society out there. I would like to end this whole presentation by these wonderful words of Swami Vivekananda. Arise, awake, and stop not till the desired end is reached. Be not afraid, for all great power throughout the history of humanity has been with the people. From out of their ranks have come the greatest geniuses of the world, and history can only repeat itself. Be not afraid of anything. You will do marvelous work. The moment you fear, you're nobody. It is the fear that's the greatest cause of misery in the world. It is the fear that's the cause of all superstitions. It's fear that is the cause of all arrows, and it's fearlessness that brings heaven in a moment. Therefore, arise, awake, and stop not until the goal is reached. These are the words of Swami Vivekananda. And since we are talking about this, during this particular month, a whole range of events, and the whole event being sort of led by our Chancellor from the Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapit and the Vice Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapit, I cannot but only imagine the wonderful innovative process that Bal Gangadhar Tilak himself had initiated during the British days in India, where he started off this whole issue of Ganpati Utsav. What an innovation! He brought in the whole community together, and the community as a whole and society as a whole would not only celebrate but would also put up things together, put their thoughts together, bring in unity and take the world ahead. And that's what Bal Gangadhar Tilak did. And with these words, I end my talk and thank you very much.